Welcome folks to the Azure Arc Server Forum. This is the April forum. Today we've got planned for you a lot of focus actually on migration. So we're going to be talking a little bit about the simplified cloud migration journey for Azure Arc with customers, and Snehit will be sharing that. Then Lance will be sharing the SQL migrations for Azure Arc as well, including their assessment capabilities, as well as migration to SQL MI. Then we'll have Megan share more about opportunities to provide feedback for what is Operations 360, as well as our Google Cloud provider, our GCP connector, right in time for GCP Next this week. And finally, we'll have Puram, who's going to share one of the new Windows Server management capabilities around advanced or accelerated networking. So we've got a lot planned for today, and we'll go ahead and kick things off. So first, I wanted to share a little bit of updates from our connected machine agent side. So you'll see some updates in terms of some new fixes, some new features and enhancements with the Azure Connected Machine Agent. We had releases both in March and in April. And so we do update our release notes really regularly, so you'll be able to see anything new that's coming up from our agent release notes in terms of what's going on there. So I did want to share that, and we also included a quick recap of that in our newsletter as well. The other point I wanted to quickly highlight is we are continuing to engage with customers that are interested in talking to us about how they're really positioning Arc for modernizing for their modern server management experience from System Center Configuration Manager, Microsoft Endpoint Configuration Manager. So if you are a Configuration Manager customer thinking about where do I go for server, you have Intune for client for modern experience. The Arc Server product group is speaking regularly with these customers. And so we'd love to get your feedback and kind of pick your brain, learn about your current environment and gaps you see versus Arc, especially as we invest in key gaps like software distribution, app patching capabilities, as well as local caching. So with that, you can sign up at ak.ms Arc VMApps feedback. So that's all we have in terms of housekeeping. Now I will hand it over to Snehit. So feel free to take control of the slide, Snehit, or you can reshare if you want. And we're excited to hear more about really the Arc plus Migrate integration and how that's simplifying the journey for our customers. So looking forward to hearing. Thanks, Snehit.
Thanks, Arnav. So we are working on a few, I think, let me share my screen, might be easier. Okay. I hope you can see my screen.
Yep.
Yeah, all right. Yeah. So a lot of our customers see Arc as a first step towards cloud migration, especially to Azure. Really today, the journey to the cloud, especially with tooling that Microsoft provides, is for our customers is not any different for any other customer. So we have tooling that still treats Arc enabled resources differently than any on-prem resources. So what we are trying to do is bring the tooling capabilities into the tooling so that you have a much more simplified migration journey to Azure. So with that in mind, I'll first quickly walk through how we see cloud migration journeys. Again, there are various ways to think about this, but what we broadly call them as decide, plan, and execute phases. Customers typically in the decide phase, they're articulating business goals as to why they want to move to the cloud. They want to understand the ROI for cloud. They want to decide amongst different public cloud options, of course, and finally, the outcome at this stage is to select which cloud they want to move for their applications. And then they get into the planning phase where they're evaluating different migration strategies for each application. They're trying to choose the right migration or modernization tools for those applications, and then select the right cloud architecture for those applications, and then eventually finally generate a high confidence migration plan. At this stage, the outcome they're looking for is to finalize the migration strategy and plans. And once they've completed their planning and decided what to do with each of their applications, how they should move to the cloud, then it's in the execution phase where they're actually implementing the plan without impacting their business, while ensuring they are meeting performance, security, and compliance requirements pre and post migration, right? Finally, once they're in the cloud, they look at post migration optimizations as well. And at this stage, their applications are fully migrated to the cloud, fully, or some of their applications at least have migrated to the cloud, and so on. So Azure Migrate basically provides tools throughout this journey to help customers in their cloud migration journey. So for example, in the decide phase, Azure Migrate provides capabilities to discover your environment with the appliance or a file import, and then you can build a comprehensive business case. So this business case is basically just about comparing what are the benefits of moving to the cloud, how much money can you save, what are your costs right now, and how would those costs improve, how does your CapEx turn into OpEx, and things like that. Once you've done that and made a decision to move to Azure, then the next stage is to get visibility into your estate about what are your applications, where are they running, and what are the dependencies between them, and so on. So Migrate provides collects data about software inventory and does dependency mapping for you to help you with application grouping and things like that. Then you group those discovered resources into groups and perform assessments. So assessments will tell you if you are ready to move to the cloud, what are the potential compatibility issues, what size SKU should you select when you move to the cloud for a particular server and or a PaaS instance, and similarly, what are the right migration tools for your migrating that workload to Azure on the right target. And then finally, in the execution stage, Azure Migrate supports with the left and shift migration, and it has integrations with other tooling, such as other specific tools, such as database migration tools and web app migration and things like that. So you can perform replication, then you test those, do a test migration, check if your app is running correctly, and then finally cut over. So this is what Azure Migrate does to help you in your cloud migration journey. So what we are trying to do right now is make this journey more seamless for Azure Arc customers. As you can see, for example, for discovery Azure Migrate, you have to deploy an appliance for it to gather the data. This is something for Arc customers who've already deployed Arc agents on in their estate. This is an overhead, right? So what we are trying to do is simplify that process while allowing you to use all the capabilities of Azure Migrate. So we are we have a new capability in private preview that is coming very soon. We would like to get your sign-ups and feedback. So what's available in the preview is that firstly, it's a very simple onboarding. So no deployment required on premises. So you just create a Azure Migrate project and then scope what Arc resources you want to include in that project. And then business case and assessments are generated automatically. So this is basically it. This is the onboarding. You just need to fill a few details. There are a few Azure resources created, and then you're able to see a business case report, which provides a comprehensive business case for you, comparing your TCO, what your TCO currently is versus what it would be in Azure, how much your savings can be across different categories like licensing, compute, storage, networking, and security management, and IT labor, and other things like that. So this could be used to get buy-in for a migration, and so on. And then once you've decided to migrate to Azure, you can automatically get migration assessments as well. These migration assessments will assess the readiness initially for Azure VM targets. They'll identify potential issues. They'll give you VM SKU recommendations, and then it'll also show you an estimated cost of running those machines in Azure, with savings options such as reservations and savings plan, all of that included too. So this is what is available, and the first is going to be available in the first version of the preview. The next version of the preview, which will follow after that, will extend the support for more things. For example, initially the preview would be limited to servers and SQL Server workloads. Then it would be extended to web app workloads as well. Initially, the business case and assessments will be just for IaaS targets. That's basically Azure VM, what is known as a lift and shift migration. And then later we'll also include past targets. For example, Azure SQL or Azure Web Apps or AKS and so on. And then you can also do right size queue recommendations. Right now, it'll be a config based as you've configured on premises. So to perform more detailed recommendations like right size queue recommendation or collect data about web apps and things like that, you would require to deploy a single Azure Migrate VM extension, which can be deployed at scale across the estate. This extension is only required to be deployed for the time you want to collect the data and could be removed later. So that's basically it. We would like you to sign up to preview if you're an Azure Arc customer and are looking at a migration project right now and getting that started quickly. We hope this will be helpful. And please reach out to me if you have any questions or if you haven't. And the sign up form is here.
All right, excellent. Arnav, just in terms of logistics, do you want to reshare the presentation and I'll take control from you?
Sounds
Probably
great.
just easiest. And while you're doing that, I'll give a quick intro of myself to everyone. Hello, everyone. I'm Lance Wright. I am a product manager in the Azure Databases team. And I work on Arc-enabled SQL Server. And I am here to talk to you all about see, I always click the wrong button here. Oh, thank you. And then, oh, take control. There it is. They moved the button. Okay, thank you. Okay, so yeah, I'm here to talk to you about, so we just heard a little bit about how Azure Arc can help you to migrate your VMs. I'm here to talk about how you can migrate an Arc-enabled SQL Server to a Azure SQL product like Azure SQL DB or Azure SQL MI, again, through Azure Arc. And, you know, we already had like a pretty good review of kind of the different phases of a migration journey. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this, you know, basically the same phases: discovery, planning, execution, and after you do migrate your data workloads to the cloud, there's always continuous optimization that you're doing to kind of fine tune and really zero in on, you know, getting the maximum performance from your Azure SQL estate, right? And, you know, really we have, I'll talk about a couple of things here, right? So I'm going to talk about a little bit about the discovery and the planning aspects, and then I'll also talk a little bit about how Azure Arc is going to help execute your migrations to Azure, right? So for the past year or so, an Arc-enabled SQL Server has had a feature called a migration assessment that is, it's free to all customers that are running an Arc-enabled SQL Server. It runs on all editions and all versions of Arc-enabled SQL Server, I should say 2012 and above. It is enabled by default. It provides you, and effectively what this is providing you is kind of this comprehensive and actionable assessment of your SQL Server's readiness to migrate to Azure. And when we're talking about migrating to Azure, we're talking about migrating to Azure SQL DB, Azure SQL MI, or a SQL Server running on an Azure VM. And this assessment gives you a few different pieces of information. One is it tells you whether you're ready or not to migrate to the particular Azure SQL product. And if you are not ready, it will actually give you step-by-step guidance on, you know, what are the different recommendations or what are the different steps that you need to take to prepare your SQL Server instance for migration to Azure SQL DB, MI, or Azure SQL VM, right? And it will also give you a best fit recommendation. Similar to what we just heard for the Azure VM, we will also give you a best fit recommendation in terms of the SKU that we recommend for you on Azure SQL DB or Azure SQL MI. And that recommendation is actually informed by the workload patterns that we are seeing on your Arc-enabled SQL Server. So we take a look at all of the performance of the SQL Server over the past 30 days, and each time you take a migration assessment, it does kind of this SKU recommendation based on what we're seeing. And the more migration assessment runs that you do on your Arc-enabled SQL Server, the confidence of our recommended SKU increases. You'll actually see on the recommendation there's kind of this five-star recommendation. With kind of your first initial run, you might only get like 1 or 2 stars on that recommendation. But as you do more and more, that confidence rating increases, and you can feel more and more confident that the SKU recommendation that we're providing to you is the best fit for your workloads. And as I mentioned, it is out of the box. It is ready without any configuration needed on your part. Once you Arc-enable a SQL Server, you can kick off the assessment to run right away. By default, it is set to run on Sunday evenings on the local server's time, but you can change that to run on a different day of the week or a different time. You can also change it to run on an ad hoc basis, right? So this is a great step in terms of the planning part of your migration project, right? So getting a report card of all of your SQL Server instances and their readiness to migrate to Azure. Now let's talk a little bit about where we're going in terms of the actual execution of the migration. So starting in just a few months, actually, we're actually in a private preview of this today, and I will share a private preview sign-up link here in just a second. We are helping customers to actually execute a migration from an Arc-enabled on-prem SQL Server or multi-cloud SQL Server to Azure SQL Managed Instance. And how this process is going to work is I mentioned to you that on that migration assessment report, we actually give you the recommended SKU for Azure SQL Managed Instance, right? And what you'll be able to do is basically click a button to say, okay, start my migration project. And one of the first steps that you'll do is you'll actually provision and create the Azure SQL Managed Instance up in Azure using the SKU recommendation that we give you. Of course, you can tweak that to however you like. You're effectively just following the same resource creation pattern that you're doing in Azure. So if we say that you need, let's say 16 vCores, right? You could adjust that to say, I'd rather have 24 vCores, or I'd rather have 8 vCores, or, adjust the storage, however you want, right? And you would then provision that managed instance up in Azure, right? Then the second step that happens is you'll actually create what's called like a distributed availability group or a DAG, where an Arc-enabled SQL Server will start seeding up to your managed instance in Azure over that DAG. And that uses a process called MI-link that we introduced with SQL Server 2022. And once you start to seed the data up into that managed instance, then you could start to point your applications towards that new Azure SQL Managed Instance. And this is where you can start that, optimization part of the exercise, right? Testing your applications, making sure they're performing as you expect, making sure they're able to connect as you expect, and things like that. And to help you with that process, we are actually also going to provide you with a report of all of the client connections that have been made to that Arc-enabled SQL Server over the past 30 days. So you can see what applications, what users have been connecting to the Azure SQL database, so you can start the process of basically repointing everything up to that managed instance. And then when you do kind of finish seeding things up into the Azure SQL Managed Instance, you have a couple of options. You can either choose to, start to change all of your connection strings over to the Azure SQL Managed Instance if you want to really, hands-on approach to connecting things over, or you can integrate in what's called Azure Load Balancer, and through Azure Load Balancer, you can trigger a failover, and you basically have a near real-time failover to Azure SQL Managed Instance without needing to change the connection string of every single application. So We're really excited about this project. We really think that's going to help customers to streamline and execute their migrations to Azure SQL Managed Instance. I did mention that we do have a private preview going on, so I'll leave this here on the screen just for a second. So if you are interested in joining the private preview of this Arc-enabled SQL Server to Managed Instance, Azure SQL Managed Instance private preview, feel free to scan the QR code, go to that AKA MS link, and my colleagues Danny and Neil are driving this private preview. Feel free to reach out to them. You can tell them that Lance sent you. And with that, I'll hand it off to the next presenter. Thanks so much, folks.
Awesome. Thanks, Lance. Thanks, Arnav. I will just also take control here. Let's see. All right. So hey everybody, my name is Megan McCrory and I am a product manager on the Azure Arc platform team. And so I know I've definitely talked to this crew before about sort of some of the things that are going around with multi-cloud as well as our Ops 360 project, but we were hoping to get some quick feedback from the group on some of these areas. And so with that, let's actually jump into the Ops 360 space. And so for this, for those of you who might be hearing Project Ops 360 for the first time, just to give you sort of in a nutshell, what we're looking at doing is we really want to provide an experience for customers to be able to onboard to the different Azure management services today in a single pane of glass for both their Arc servers and Azure virtual machines. And so oftentimes some of the feedback that we've been hearing is that, you know, I have to go to Azure Monitoring to enable monitoring. I've got to go to Update Manager to do Update Manager. And so one thing that we're looking at doing is how can we provide a really simplified at-scale experience for you to be able to not only onboard your Arc servers, but also your Azure VMs in a single way for the different Azure management services across the board. With that, we're also looking at having a simplified pricing for these management services for the Arc server space. So this is another one that we've gotten a lot of feedback from the community on, that it's really confusing to understand sort of what the price points are going to be across these different management services. That, you know, if I use machine config and policy, as well as Update Manager, it's one price. And so trying to basically figure out if we could really simplify it and drill this down into it's just one price point for these set of management services. And so sort of the set of management services that we're targeting right now are Azure Monitoring, Update Manager, Change Tracking and Inventory, and Machine Configuration and Policy. And so now, rather than you paying individually for these different management services, we are actually unifying the price point here. So it's just going to be one bundled price point for Ops 360. In addition to that, once you've actually onboarded to Ops 360, you now have this centralized dashboard view to better manage your infrastructure across the board. So this is where we really want to have more of a single pane of glass viewpoint, not only into your Arc servers on the infra side, but also your Azure VMs. So you no longer have to sort of go to two different portals to be able to see an entire view of your infrastructure that's running either inside of Azure or off Azure via Azure Arc. And then last but not least, we're also, with all of this, because we're bringing together all of these management services, the natural point for us to collide is really on the AI front. How do we actually have some cross-cutting AI scenarios that really help customers be able to proactively manage their infrastructure, help them maintain their health, troubleshoot, and then ideally in the future become just more autonomous when it comes to the daily operations that you're performing to ensure that your infrastructure is running as it should be. And so this is just a really quick overview of Project Ops 360. I know that we've done a little bit of some mock-up reviews in the previous syncs. If you are interested, feel free to reach out to me. I would be happy to give you just a deep dive into sort of our broader thinking here. But one of the pieces that we wanted to get some quick feedback on is we are actually creating a new resource provider on the Microsoft side in order for us to be able to offer this in a new sort of API set. And so we're trying to come up with the right name. Project Ops 360 is just what we're calling it internally. We're still trying to figure out the brand of this. But so with that, I'm going to go ahead and launch a poll inside of the chat window. And if you're interested in sort of filling this out, we're toying with the different names. Right now we have Microsoft.Managed Operations, Microsoft.Managed Ops, We also have Microsoft.Managed Solutions. But these are sort of the three that we've come up with. Very curious if you've got other inputs into this, if there's other things that we should really consider here. And so this is one that we wanted to get some quick feedback on. But overall, it's looking like managed ops is resonating a little bit with people. I like the response, Jonathan, in the chat. That's pretty great. But wonderful. Thank you guys so much. This is just going to help us get unblocked as we start on our engineering journey to start making the backend work real. And so we really just want to make sure that the name that we pick resonates with customers. So, yep, I like it, Kevin, whichever is less typing. All right, so that is quickly on the Ops 360 space. Again, feel free to reach out to me if you want to give more feedback or if you just want to learn more about this. Definitely happy to help. And just it's great. We're in sort of the incubation phase of this, and so we're really looking for customers to go deep with us on the Ops 360 side. But with that, switching gears. So this was the only thing that we're really kind of burning on for feedback on Ops 360 right now. So switching gears is sort of multi-cloud. One thing that we're looking at from the multi-cloud side, for those of you who have also been with us for a little while, we are already generally available for AWS. And so this is one where for customers today, if you have environments inside of AWS, you can use our multi-cloud connector to connect to your AWS accounts. And basically this gives a single pane of glass view into your inventory. And so we can basically read all of the resources that you have on the AWS side, represent those resources on the Azure side. And so that way it gives you just a single way that you can say, you know, show me all of my storage accounts across both Azure and AWS as an example. And what's nice about this too is that we will bring over all of the AWS metadata that's returned inside of their APIs. So you can even do things like tell me all of my resources that have this Azure tag or this AWS tag. So it's a really nice way for sort of customers to get this single pane of glass for inventory and asset management. The other thing that we have already available for AWS is where we can actually onboard your EC2 VMs at scale through this solution. And so any EC2 machine that's discovered or even deployed in the future, we can automatically use our connector to be able to install that Arc agent. So that way you can, of course, take advantage of the Azure Arc capabilities, including all of these management services. Sort of next step for us is we're looking at GCP support. So what is it going to take for us to offer the connector for Google Cloud? And so we're interested in sort of your feedback points around like what's the most sort of important inventory items we should take an account for first, and being able to sort of highlight some of these different just feedback points that we're looking at to see sort of how we want to prioritize being able to support Google Cloud as sort of the next big thing for the multi-cloud connector. So if you wouldn't mind, I will also paste this link inside of the chat window for the survey link, but we also have the QR code. Please, if you're using GCP or if you're using multi-cloud in general, we would absolutely love your feedback if you wouldn't mind taking this survey. But with that, let me just look in the chat. I see, Jonathan, is there a roadmap for the connector for resources aside from EC2? So what we have today is one of the other things that we're looking at doing from the AWS side is in addition for the Arc onboarding, we support EC2 today. The other thing that we're looking at introducing is how can we Arc onboard EKS. And so for the EKS clusters, and so that's something that we're also looking at our roadmap for. But then other than that, if you have different feedback for other areas that you're looking at when it comes to the multi-cloud connector side for AWS, like if it's, you know, lifecycle management of machines, if it's broader than just inventory, we would absolutely love your feedback. But on the immediate sort of next steps on our roadmap is the Arc enablement of EKS clusters and then this GCP support. So that's what we've got upcoming here. Awesome. Yeah, the cost management is definitely one too that we're looking at. Cool. Well, with that, I think, Arnav, that is it from my side. So with that, I can pass it over to the next presenter.
Awesome. So welcome, Param. I don't know if you want to screen share or take control for the advanced networking piece.
Awesome. I think I can take control. Let's see if this works. Okay, I think we're good. Awesome. Thank you for having me, Arnav, and thank you for introducing me to this Theo. So quick introduction for those who haven't seen me around. My name is Param Mahajan. I'm a product manager on the Edge networking team. The Edge networking team is within the CoreOS org, which basically is the team that builds out all the networking stack and the networking solution on all of our Edge products, right? So think of Azure Local or Azure Stack HCI, Windows Server. These are the products that we're shipping with, and we're the platform that builds the networking and infrastructure services that plug into these. So today specifically, I want to speak about the two new developments on Windows Server 2025 that I'm currently working on and that we've shipped with the 2025 release. So coming in, right, especially looking at edge networking deployments, we saw a bunch of challenges for us, right? The first one was deployment times were extremely long. They were very complicated. Customers would have to run and maintain multiple scripts. There was a lot of consistency issues. Lastly, there used to be like a lot of errors, a lot of support requests and ICMs, and support team spent quite a lot of time just deploying and figuring out what is going wrong with any sort of cluster, right? And even after your host networking was deployed and running and you moved it to production, there was a big gap in operational analytics. You didn't know if your cluster was healthy. You didn't know if there was a problem, where is the problem coming from, so on and so forth, right? So this was the problem area that we were looking at, and therefore we introduced two new products to kind of deal with this, and they are now coming to Server 2025. So the first product which deals with host networking is Network ATC. And the focus here is more going to be on Network HUD. So I'll just go through this very briefly. Network ATC is basically, a host networking tool which reduces host networking deployment time, complexity, and error. It takes what was previously like maybe a few days long, multiple support calls, multiple ICM involved process into a 4 to 5 minute deployment using just 2 to 3 commands, right? So Network ATC deploys what we call intent-driven networking. So you tell Network ATC what NICs or your adapters you want to use for what particular intent, and Network ATC will go ahead and deploy its intended Microsoft best practices recommended solution, right? So Network ATC will configure things like adapter properties from RSS, VMQ, VMMQ, DCB quas. It will automatically configure your storage IP addresses, and it will also configure cluster-aware things like network naming, live migration transport selection, live migration bandwidth limit, adjusting those bandwidth limits, all of these things, right? Network ADC ships with a day 0 as well as a day 100 experience on Windows Admin Center. And recently we had a bunch of new updates like adding in custom subnet masks when you submit your storage intent. We updated our PowerShell documentation to make it easier to work via PowerShell as well. And then we are also thinking of expanding scope to non-S2D external storage scenarios. Moving on to network HUD, right? So with network ATC done, we're at a stage where your host networking and your cluster is fully deployed. You know what your NICs, your vNICs, your virtual switch in your cluster is looking like. But you still don't know if everything is configured correctly, if the traffic flowing through your network matches what has been set at the host level, right? So this is where network HUD comes in. Network HUD, as it says, is in private preview on Windows Server 2025. So this is where I look to all of you to basically try it out, test, validate, and give us as much feedback and validation and your sentiment as much as you can. Reason being, we want to make as many changes, fine tuning, and incorporate that feedback as we move towards public preview and GA. Network HUD ships as an Arc extension, which can therefore receive out-of-box updates. So any bug fix, any new functionality, or any new health scenario reaches you right away. Network HUD is enabled through the Azure portal, and the alerting experiences through the Windows Admin Center cluster view. And Network HUD, most importantly, also relies on switch information for some of the more cluster-aware checks. So the switch you use in your Server 25 cluster has to be certified for Azure Local. Having said that, what does like a typical issue that Network HUD covers looks like? First is a couple of spot checks, right? So these are checks that you don't need your cluster up and running. You just need some service in the background that is constantly running and making these checks, right? So some of them are inbox driver check, driver age checks, right? So if your driver is more than 2 years old, we're going to give you a warning. If your driver is more than 3 years old, we're going to create a health fault. Any NIC which is unstable, which is just reconnecting constantly or restarting a lot, which seems to happen a few times, and we've seen ICMs around that. Network card is constantly tracking and monitoring for that. And if at any point it happens with any NIC in your entire cluster, it's going to alert you, right? Anytime you have two NICs plugged into NIC ports, but the NIC ports don't have the capacity to fully maximize the NIC's link speed, we would call that PCI bandwidth oversubscription. And anytime you have that scenario, you're basically going to bottleneck your traffic because you're going to expect a higher speed from your NICs, which you're not going to get given the oversubscription on the NIC ports, right? So network card will also alert you to that. So these are all spot checks. So network card is constantly running them in the background. Moving on to the second part of checks, these are more cluster-aware checks. So network card makes sure that your network ATC intent, which basically holds your entire host networking configuration together, is intact, has been deployed successfully, and there's no errors, right? So not having a successfully deployed ATC intent means your deployment could move away from the ideal intended goal state. Network ATC prevents drift. It could also mean that something just never got deployed, and what you're expecting is not actually there. So network card works hand in hand with a network ATC to make sure that doesn't happen. Secondly, network card also uses LLDP TLV parsing to make sure things that are so let's say like the properties and configurations advertised by your switch are the same that is expected by your host and what is set up by network ATC, right? So one very powerful example here is, let's say you expect a VLAN of 25 for your storage intent, and your all your workloads and everything is running on storage VLAN 25, right? But the switch is just not advertising storage VLAN 25, and which ends up leading to there being extra traffic or extra bottlenecking on traffic that goes over other storage VLANs. In the case where a second VLAN is not set up, it just leads to an outright failure. So network card will take the LLDP frames coming from the switch, parse through them to read what VLAN the switch is advertising. It'll work with network ATC to understand what is the VLAN expected at the host level. So what ATC set and what is expected with the VMs and the different workloads you have running on your cluster. And if there is ever a mismatch between the two, it's going to alert you and say, hey, this is wrong. And you'll have a chance to fix it before it actually becomes a problem. So that's a quick background on network card. The whole point of network card is that we want customers and users to fail early and fail inexpensively. And basically before it becomes a problem in production for a customer, right? So here's a quick couple of screenshots for how network card will look like. It's just for enablement, it's the standard Azure portal experience where you go to the Azure portal, you see the network card tile, which is currently in preview. You click on it, there's a flyout, you hit enable, and it's up and running on your system. Second screenshot below is what hard health fault looks like, right? So go to Windows Admin Center, cluster view, you'll see all network card generated health faults right on there. With that being said, I have a quick demo to basically demonstrate how network ATC and network card operate end to end. So I hope the sound comes on. All right, so that was a quick end-to-end demo on how Network ATC and Network Hard combine to provide you with a seamless, networking solution at the edge. So a couple of quick calls to action for all of you, quick few requests. So please validate and test Network ATC and Network Hard on your Server 25 clusters. We have a deployment series. It's a blog series which recently started like a couple of weeks back. So please check that out. It's at aka.ms/deployment series. So this takes you through all the deployment steps that you would need to have a cutting edge modernized networking stack for any edge networking deployment. And the series is based off of Server 25 clusters. So please check out the blog series. And lastly, if you want to try out any of these features, right? Network ATC, Network HUD. My team also works with software-defined networking and accelerated networking. But my primary focus is obviously Network ATC and Network HUD. So if you want to try them out, Network HUD is in private preview. You have an interest, you think it's useful, please reach out to us. The email to reach out to us is edgenetfeedback@microsoft.com. So please reach out to us. We are very eager to have people come on, try it out, give us feedback, and we really hope to onboard this feedback because a lot of our feature and product development is influenced by the feedback we receive. So it's very valuable to us. I'll put the emails in the email in the chat and the blog series short link in the chat as well. And thank you for paying attention, and thank you for having me, Arnav.
Awesome. Thanks so much to everyone who presented. Thank you, Prem, Megan, Lance, and Snehit. Hope this was a great session for everyone. We know there was a lot covered, and we will be uploading this to YouTube shortly in the next week or so for folks that weren't able to join synchronously. So thank you all again for attending, and looking forward to the next Arc Server Forum in May. Thanks.